The anti-abortion mobs are all in their feels about the FDA approving a generic abortion pill, and Josh Hawley's leading the pity party.
We will break down their breakdown. Plus, did you know that a pro-abortion supermodel is a thing? We have comedian, author Sarah Hartshorne coming up to talk abortion, body shaming, and her new book, You Want to Be on Top?, where she spills the tea about her time on America's Next Top Model.
All this and the latest news affecting your bathing suit area coming up on this episode of the Feminist Buzzkills podcast. The show that is slowly realizing a broken Marjorie Taylor Greene is right twice a day.
Sure, twice a day. Fine.
I mean, yeah, good for you, Marjorie. I'm Liz Winstead, and that is my illustrious co-host, Moji Alabodale.
Hello! We're going to get to the show, but first, I'm big mad about something that happened last week while we were off.
So if you're frequent listeners to the pod, you know that for the past couple of podcasts, we've been promoting a fundraiser for the Lovering Health Center in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They were having a big gala called Cheers for Choice, and it's a party and a screening of the documentary made for Abortion Access Front about our work called No One Asked You. So they were very excited, had all these tickets sold, and 6 days before the event, the theater, which is called the Music Hall in Portsmouth, canceled on them.
Literally 6 days before the event, they just canceled it. They said that it was because of safety considerations and security concerns. They said that there was a planned protest that they felt like they didn't have the ability to manage. But 6 days before the event, I don't know.
Hire security. And if you don't think, hey, let's hire security, then it is political. You know, they issued some bullshit statement being like, we just can't do it. We just, it's not political. We just can't handle what's about to happen. And it's like, you know what? You booked an abortion event. You knew it was an abortion event. And if you didn't take the necessary precautions, that's on you. That's not on them. How many events do we do, Moji?
If we book a venue, we let them know. We make sure that they are comfortable well before 6 days in advance and able to take care of any concerns that might come up.
That's right. And we have performed in cities much smaller than Portsmouth and much more dangerous than Portsmouth. And so I think that it's messy. Now, the good news is they scrambled, and the hat's off to the Hawthorne, which is, I want to give shout out and link to the Hawthorne, which is an event center, wedding center that offered to host them.
Woo! Boom, 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 boom.
And I feel like this is just an outrage. And just an interesting side note about all of this is Margaret Cho was booked at the Music Hall in Portsmouth a few days after. And I did not write Margaret and say, hey, they yanked our show, but a bunch of people reached out to Margaret. And if Margaret Cho's not the best person, I don't know who is. She got on stage and she talked about how fucked up it was that they canceled the event without notice, how important it was, how they need to step up.
And how incredible our organization is because Margaret Cho rides for our organization the way we ride for Margaret Cho.
That's exactly right. But, when you live in a big, giant state that is really spread out and under attack, New Hampshire is a mess. It is sort of like the Alabama of the Northeast. And so when you have a fundraiser that's so important to get people who live in rural areas the health care they need and try to get them there and raise money, for you to cancel 6 days in advance, it's a fucking bad look and a bad move. And so thanks, Margaret, for calling it out. And thanks to the Hawthorne for stepping up and hosting, because they had a fabulous event. And I'm so thrilled. So go, Lovering, go. We're going to put a link to donate to them in our show notes. But, a lot of shit can get yanked on a dime.
And it happens to us. It happens to other providers. And so support your providers, support your local clinics, support clinics in other states that that need help, because this is a time we all need to come together and support each other.
And the truth is, support this podcast. I'm going to put a plug in right now to support us on Patreon, because we're the only podcast that comes to you in the abortion space from people who are on the ground and working directly with the providers, with the activists, with the escorts, with the funds. And we're bringing you information that you're not getting anywhere else. We're also in places just like Portsmouth, providing care and doing the work that it's not free for us to travel. It's not free for us to be able to have to get extra security if we're forced upon ourselves to do so, to travel around. Like, that's one of the things we have to do is sometimes when we're out on the road, we have to get our own security because a club can't provide it when we're going from point A to point B. How are we safe during that? So it's a plug for our Patreon. If you like the work we do here, if you're learning a lot, if you want to support us staying out on the road, please go ahead, go to the Patreon and become a monthly subscriber. You can go to patreon.com/feministbuzzkills, and all of your pledges support our work at Abortion Access Fund and this pod and everything we do. That's patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.
Liz, I'm glad we got that off our chest.
God, you take a week off, man?
Everything happens. So, lots to talk about this week. Let's get to it. RFK stepped in two big piles of repro madness this week. First, he said he watched a woman on TikTok gobble up Tylenol while she had a baby in her placenta. Liz, her what? Her placenta. Oh my God, sir, no one is living in anyone's placenta. It's literally a feed bag. Also, I scoured TikTok and I couldn't find one single video of a woman ripping open a bottle of Tylenol and gobbling it like, I don't know, a party-sized bag of peanut M&Ms, which of course is something all pregnant women do naturally.
It's so wild. I mean, all women do, to be fair.
That was me yesterday.
That was just part one. It was in one of those weird Trump, like, we're all going to report back to dear leader about stuff we know. You know, how all those cabinet members do that, and it's super creepy. So he says that, and people are like, okay, that's weird. Then he goes on to say circumcision increases the rates of autism because Tylenol is given to children after they get clipped. Now, I'm not a researcher for sure, but it would indicate, if that was true, that like there would be higher rates of autism in like Muslim and Jewish communities.
Sure.
Right? So I did a Google. It was populated with tons of research from like the NIH and the Journal of American Medicine that said Jews do not have higher rates of autism. And one of the researchers had said there was a study from Israel, and it said studies in Israel, which has a large Jewish population.
You don't say.
I know. Shows that the overall prevalence of autism is similar to that of Western countries. So fuck you, sir, for your wildness. I feel like all of the big news this week comes out of RFK's pie hole.
Because, you know, he's never met a crackpot study. He didn't want to, like, I don't know, take on like Elon at a ketamine buffet. So this week he was also directing the EPA to look for abortion pills in the wastewater.
They won't let it go.
The Anti-Abortion Society has basically been pushing this.
The Anti-Abortion Society.
That's what I'm calling it. It's a society. I've been pushing this narrative for fucking ever. And finally, they have found a champion or a heroin brain or a brain worm to get to the bottom of it.
I mean, yeah.
I don't know. This feels like this is just one of his weird fetid water kinks or something.
I feel like he's got a lot of fetid water kinks. I mean, can't you just picture him sitting in shit-filled water, panning for abortion detritus like a miner in some toxic gold rush?
I'm sure that's his Christmas card, Liz.
100%. It is so crazy. And finally, in the trashy-ass news, Nigel Farage, the UK's Brexit con man, is going full fascist by importing the anti-abortion playbook of America's #1 hate peddlers, the Alliance for Defending Freedom. Moji, Nigel Farage is basically, if Russell Vogt and Pam Bondi had a baby and then it was raised by Kristi Noem, that's how garbage he is.
Liz, I too did 3 Googles, and it seemed like for years his only redeeming quality was that he had nothing to say on the subject of abortion. But then, November 2024, I don't know what you were doing then, but it was a busy time. He all of a sudden decided to complete his hate circle and just add ending abortion in UK to his priority list. So here's where we are now.
That's where we are. You know, in fact, I was like thinking about it, and I was like, oh, they're importing the anti-abortion shit train. Is that the only tariff-free import from the U.S.?
No, it's not, Liz. That shit is going to cost them. It's costing us still.
100%. Welcome to the United KK Kingdom. Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
RFK.
It's a lot of case. Ketamine.
A lot of conspiracies going on. But I think we should get to the story that has been the worst gift in the world that keeps on giving.
So a few weeks back, we covered on the pod that the FDA had approved a new generic version of mifepristone. So we, of course, cheered, and we were so happy, and the Republican establishment has lost their collective mind. So we wanted to let you know how that's manifested.
So first, Carolyn Levitt immediately, walks it back, issues a statement saying the FDA was just following the law. If the generic pill can prove efficacy, it must be approved. Wow, they just didn't know how to spin it because it's been in motion
For like 10 months. It had been in motion for like 10 months, and I guess they just weren't paying attention. They were too busy breaking the law to notice that things were moving through the pipe.
Right. And, everybody had to weigh in. Josh Hawley had to, of course, weigh in to say that mifepristone is dangerous to women and 100% lethal to the child. And he's reacting by saying, oh, you know what? You want this? I'm going to remove abortion from all kinds of healthcare plans and any way the government can come in to help you. You're just going to die of abortion and the government's not going to lift a finger. He is big mad. And by the way, I thought the government was shut down. Here he is issuing a bunch of shit.
I mean, really work on reopening the government, Josh. Also, another senator lost his mind, Lindsey Graham. He led a group of 51 Republican senators in sending a letter to Health and Human Services, basically saying, can you reevaluate this? What are you doing? Can you maybe not do this?
Yeah, and good luck, And then there's, of course, the doctor that approved RFK, Bill Cassidy, he said, the FDA approving one more tool to kill babies is a betrayal. This is not what Commissioner Macri and Senator Kennedy indicated they would do in their confirmation hearings. I'm sorry, what? And of course, the House Republicans, they're all up in arms about it. And, I was trying to figure out who was leading the charge on the House side. And it's a representative named Mark Harris from North Carolina who is demanding that those who approve the drug be fired. He sent a strongly worded letter emoji that's clear that the rogue actors within the FDA are working to undermine both the sanctity of life and the administration's commitment to protecting it. Now, here's what I think is so interesting, is that with Bill Cassidy and Mark Harris, when Macri, the FDA chair, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. were in their confirmation hearings, they danced around this issue and pretended that they weren't right-wing goons, pretended that they were going to be very judicious about all these things. They were grilled.
They were going to follow the science.
And Bill Cassidy, who is here being he promised he wasn't going to kill any more babies. Bill Cassidy was the one who grilled RFK saying, do you promise about vaccines? Do you promise that you're going to follow the science? And so since I didn't hear RFK promising to get rid of mifepristone because he never said that out loud, he clearly was saying it to all of them in
Quietly. Yes. When the cameras,
right?
Absolutely. 1,000%.
1,000%. So back to Mark Harris, who had several attempts at becoming a Congress member back in 2016, 2018, finally landed his seat in 2024, riddled with controversy. There was, one of his elections had voter fraud. It was a mess. But Mark Harris is somebody who we have been following at Abortion Access Front for a long time because we found a speech of his back from, I think, 2016 or 18, I can't remember, that we were talking about back then and showcasing him back then, so much so that when we did a big fundraiser, our award show called the Golden Probes, which coincidentally Margaret Cho was the host, he was a winner of best acting like you care about women
in a non-supportive role. So I was like, oh, listen, and she was like, wait a minute, he said some bullshit and I have the tapes and we should listen to it. And we listened to it and we were like, the fuck is this shit? Everybody needs to hear this and know that this is the person requiring that our federal workers at Health and Human Service get fired for doing their jobs.
God instructs all Christian wives to submit to their husbands. You see, wives, please hear me this morning. The message is not from your husband to submit. The message is from the Lord. Now, ladies, you can rebel against that command. But just please understand, you're not rebelling against your husband when you do. You are rebelling against the Lord.
Ew.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so gross, Liz.
That guy is in Congress. And that just goes to the point of us for years sounding the alarm that these right-wing fascists have been taking over, are planning to take over, and we're keeping the quiet part to themselves until recently. But like, he's not alone, right? And so this guy who's like, Christian women, you have to submit to your husband, and I submit to you, Moji. What if your Christian husband says, I want you to take the generic abortion pill? Bum, bum, bum.
What a pickle.
So he's leading the charge and apparently has enough juice in the House that they've selected him to do that. So let that also be a thought in your head that he's not some outlier. It's like, yeah, let's get Mark Harris to lead the charge and represent the House of Representatives, and that must mean that he's even wackier maybe than Mike Johnson.
Oh, he is wackier. I went to his website and all of his press releases is just supporting one wacky proclamation after the other. He's been there a little bit of time and he's doing a lot of harm.
A lot of the anti-abortion pests are issuing statements. We won't go through everybody. Lila Rose from an organization called Live Action, Marjorie Dannenfelser from the Susan B. Anthony list, which is like the Emily's list of anti-abortion candidates. And then, of course, Mike Pence had to slide into Americans' DMs.
I didn't even know he was still talking.
Apparently, he called for the approval to be reversed. So the truth is, a bunch of these people are powerful. They're powerful people, and they're saying people should step down, people should be fired, you should reverse this decision, all this stuff. So Moji, here's the question. Can all this bluster change the FDA approval, A? And B, can they fire people who approve the generic? The answer is who knows, because we live in a world where laws and rules aren't real. So there are almost 1,000 firings slated at HHS alone. So it seems like they probably will go after these people that approve the generic.
Well, they're trying to use this shutdown to fire people, and HHS is the second biggest agency they're going after. But just a few days ago, the courts paused these firings, right? So I don't know if they allow them to happen, then I do think the people who allowed this approval, this routine approval to go through, could absolutely be the people on the chopping block.
And it just leads the question, even if the courts do say these firings are unconstitutional and you can't fire them, A, will those people stay or be like, fuck it, I don't want to work in a government that's going to be giving me so much stress, and then maybe just say, pay me out, I'm not coming back? That makes me really worry, right?
As we've talked about extensively on the pod, the FDA has recently decided to look into the safety and efficacy of mifepristone, citing sham research from an anti-abortion and anti-LGBTQ think tank called the Ethics and Public Policy Center.
And here's what's so awful about that is that if they rule that this bogus study they're using as research is somehow valid, that gives them the opportunity to ignore hundreds of actual studies and 25 years of people using mifepristone. And that means they could ban the pill outright or severely limit the access to the pill.
And again, it would directly affect this generic because the generic was approved because it is bioidentical to the primary. And so whatever happens to the original mifepristone will happen to this generic and the other generic that's on the market.
That's right. And it's something that we have to be vigilant about paying attention to, because if they can basically take a study that was manufactured by anti-abortion people to hand over to the FDA, because the guy literally said in his hearings, Macri said in his hearings before Dr. Bill Cassidy, that he was not going to go and just directly ban medication abortion. But if new science came up, he would look at that and then make a reassessment. So like magic, new science reappeared. That's not science at all. And now they have this window. So that is the thing that we need to be watching for very closely when they're going to be looking at that study, what their findings are. And we will be looking at that story super closely and keep you up to date as details unfold, not only on this podcast, but on AAF socials.
That's right. And speaking of social, we have an exciting guest this week with lots to say.
She's an activist, a comedian, a model, and now an author. And her new book, You Want to Be on Top, is a tell-all about her experience as a contestant on America's Next Top Model. Through her memoir, she also reveals a bigger picture of the scourge of beauty standards, the cult of reality TV, and how to find yourself through it all. Please welcome Sarah Hartshorne.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
I like that you're waving in a podcast.
Yeah, because it's a visual medium.
Sarah, we are just like, don't even know where to begin because your history with us is so friggin' rich. You were a road warrior with us for years, traveling around in a van. And so we think of you as America's Next Top pro-abortion model.
Yes.
That is how we think of you.
It's so weird. And I was just talking the other day about how at one point I like got a bunch of travel stuff. And I think this was probably like February or January of 2020. And I was like, next tour, I'm going to be so ready. I'm going to have all these things. Like I have all this experience being on the road and driving. And now like I had something that was like, you can hook over a seat and put your feet in so you can sleep really comfortably. And I was like, this is going to be so clutch for the next tour.
That was some real optimistic thinking there, Sarah.
Yup. And I was like, and then wait, what's this in the news? Weird. I miss being on the road.
I know.
My friend is visiting here from Pittsburgh, where I parked a 16-passenger van on one of the famous Pittsburgh hills with a cop watching me. I forgot about that. To get a hospital gown for one of our actions.
You were really good at driving massively huge vehicles.
And that wasn't true for everyone who drove the large vehicles. So that is particularly high praise.
Let's talk about your incredible book, You Want to Be on Top. So, okay, you had this wild experience on a super popular show that ran for like 20 cycles. And so you wrote a book about it. And I listened to the book and I highly recommend buy the book in hardcover so Sarah can sign it, but listen to Sarah read it because
Thank you.
really, really fun. So were you inspired to write the book because of your own experiences? Or was it really that like you had your experience and then you kept hearing from other people who participated and they were sharing experiences. And then you were like, wait a minute, people need to hear about the totality of the experiences that people went through on the show.
I mean, like so many great works of literature, my book got its start on TikTok.
Yes.
You know, I was making TikToks about it in 2020 in quarantine. And I was super surprised that people were still very interested. And a lot of them would like hit, you know, a couple million views. And I was like, dang, like there is still interest and an audience for stories about this show. So I was doing that. And I kept getting these comments that were like, wow, that's like super messed up. What happened? And I was sort of like, huh, I guess I never thought of it that way. That's crazy. And then more and more, I would sort of make the videos. And I remember I made this one video where you can kind of see in my face halfway through, I start to realize that what I'm saying is like very messed up. Like I'm talking about how they told us, you know, there's 14 of you and you only get a certain amount of time to shower in the morning. And also the theme is environmentalism. So you guys should shower together, you know, for the environment.
Oh.
And I'm like talking about that experience. And as I'm saying it, I'm like, that is a little weird. That's a little creepy.
Was RFK the producer of the show? Because that sounds like an RFK environmental plan. Like, you know what? What we want to do is have women shower together.
Also, to make it even creepier, the rule was if you were in the bathroom stall, like with the toilet, they had these little stalls that just had a toilet in it. You know, like those fancy houses sometimes have like a big open bathroom and then a stall for the toilet. They had 2 stalls for toilets in this big fancy Hollywood Hills mansion. And the rule was they wouldn't film you if you were alone in that stall or in the shower, the big shower, if you were alone. But if there was more than one of you, then legally they could film you. You'd signed, it said in the contract. And so, of course, they wanted us to shower together because then they could film us in there.
Ew.
No, that doesn't sound like that's legally binding.
And I'm like, what lawyer? Like, what was the conversation there? You know what I mean?
I'm so glad you brought up lawyers because one of the things that struck me earlier in the book is exactly how like scary and litigious they were and like how they were like giving these like legalese threats that probably included this, like, oh my God, if you're two of you in the shower, we're bringing the camera in.
Yeah.
So, like, when you were writing this book, were you worried about, like, any of this coming to bite you in your butt? Or, like, how did you ensure that, like, the version that you told in your book was, like, watertight enough that they couldn't go after your children and your children's children and their children's
My
children?
children's children. Yeah. So in the book, I talk about how the producers over and over told us that they would not just sue us, but they would garnish our wages for the rest of our life, and they would sue our children, our children's children, our children's children's children. And I really probably should have been more afraid, but I gotta say, an NDA really hates to see me come in because this mouth is flapping, you know? Like, I want to say that I told this story because it needed to be told and the time was right, and my NDA had expired, which is sort of true. It expired in, I think, 2023 or 2024. But I was going to tell the story. I'm sharing stuff, you know, I'm a compulsive oversharer. And so it was coming out one way or another, whether it was TikToks or it was this book. And an agent actually slid into my Twitter DMs. Again, another notorious place for quality literature.
Yeah.
And she was like, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I said, no, but I do know what I would call it if I did. And she was like, so do you mean yes? I was like, yes, I do mean yes. I have thought about it. Yes. So yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I got lucky because a lot of the NDA did expire a couple of years after the final episode of the show aired. On the other hand, technically, they never canceled the show. They just stopped making it, which I think was a legal tactic because it does say in the contract, like, if the show is canceled, then X amount of years later, the NDA doesn't matter. So on the one hand, like, I sort of am legally on the hook. I hope that there's a bit of a Barbra Streisand effect, which is that Barbra Streisand sued some paparazzi for publishing photos on a website that had like 30 hits before she sued and had like 3 million after she sued. So I hope that them going after me would seem a little bit like that. But also, you can't sign away the ability to be abused. You can't say, like, there's no contract that can protect someone from that type of behavior being exposed. So I think I'm okay. And also, like, one of the biggest things I talk about is that we weren't paid. And that, I think, is one of the biggest things they didn't want people to talk about because we want to perpetuate this myth that, like, being on TV means success. Blanket statement, end of story, no further questions or issues. And it's not true. And I think talking about that and talking about how we weren't paid and talking about actual numbers, especially for women in any industry, is important.
Especially in an industry like that where you are on display.
Yeah.
You really, throughout the beginning of the book, bring up all the different times when all of the different power forces, you know, whether it's the production company, the network, the producers of the show, went on and on to threaten you. I mean, I felt like I might have to pay money just to listen to it in my car, right? I was like, am I getting sued? Like, this is wild. And it's preying upon people in a way where you give young people, you know, this is a young person's game, unless you're an older model, right?
Mhm.
Modeling is a young person's game. You give a young person a contract that maybe is their dreams. That contract is literally thicker than the Gutenberg Bible.
Yeah.
Nobody even reads terms of service. I'm sure everybody just kind of signed it.
Oh, 100%. Everyone signed. And it's interesting because I did sometimes get comments on videos that were like, oh, I tried out for the show and I made it X far, but I wouldn't sign the contract, so I didn't go on. So you never hear those stories because and it's like they said on the show over and over again. Another one of the phrases that they drilled into us was, there are a million girls who would kill for this opportunity and we have their phone number.
And they did. It was not a lie.
And it's true.
Is there something you do to turn off the noise? Because one thing that you kept coming to in the book is like, you're doing okay. You're like kicking it, living your life. And then they come and they say, is it because you are too big, too small, too whatever we don't want you to be right now? Like, what do you do to turn off that noise?
I mean, at the time, I did not turn off the noise. And every time they asked, it would amplify the noise. I tried really hard in the book to sort of describe how blindsiding it was, even though the thing about body dysmorphia and the thing about eating disorders is they try so hard to see every possibility and every way that someone could ever possibly think you're fat. You know, like, you're spending an insane amount of mental energy being like, well, maybe from this angle and from that moment. And if I do that, then, they'll think, the fat girl's doing that. Which, side note, at the time, I was not fat.
It's so wild looking at those pictures and being like, that's nobody's fat. Like, in the most objective.
Like, watching myself talk and knowing and like reading my journal, I was like, oh, girl, come on. And also, there were so many journal entries like where I would, I was reading and researching where I just wrote about how much I weighed and what I ate that day. And I'm like, girl, you met Tay Diggs today. I know that for a fact. I watched it on TV. Where is that in the entry? And it's just, I think when you have an eating disorder, your weight is the thing you think about the most and talk about the least. And that is where shame lives 100%. So yeah, I didn't turn off the noise for a long time. I did realize recently, with the rise of GLP-1s, there's been a lot of talk about food noise, which I think is good because I do think it's a good thing to like talk about and raise awareness. I don't know how I feel about GLP-1s, to be honest. I think they're doing a lot of good for a lot of people. I'm very conflicted.
And great for them.
And great for them.
Yes.
Here's what I'll say about GLP-1s that is so telling to me. One thing that Serena Williams is using to sell them is like, I lost weight on GLP-1s that I could never lose as a professional athlete. So my question is, if she's a professional athlete performing at the peak of her physical ability, and she is one of the most strongest, amazing women in the world, why does she need to lose weight?
Right.
Why was that the noise in your head?
Hot take. It's not about health. It's about standards of beauty and then male gaze and how people will accept us and navigating through life looking a certain way so that people don't bring assumptions, not about health. And that part is heartbreaking, knowing that that's how most people navigate.
Yeah. And also, like, it's one thing to do certain things for the male gaze or to control how you're perceived, right? It's like there's that amazing part of the interview with Jinx Monsoon and Z-Way where Jinx talks about how dyeing your hair is like this tiny little trans thing. You are matching how you feel on the inside to how people perceive you on the outside. I dye my hair. And so like, sure, do some things to control how you look, but don't disguise them as health. Don't try to pitch it to me as health. And if you think that you are healthier, then what are you leaving out of your life that actually is healthier, right? Like, what nutrition are you missing? What joy are you missing? Like,
what experience, like meeting Tay Diggs and fully forgetting about it, are you missing because the noise is overpowering? When I read that article, I was just like, this like resonates so hard to like literally every woman and some men that I know.
Yeah.
And goes to the bigger gaslight of how we walk the earth. And one of the things that I was really interested in your book is this through line you had about cult behavior and how being on America's Next Top Model was cult behavior and how these producers would use the language of cult leadership and apply it so that you would comply. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how that played out, but also how it's such a parallel to this larger world we're all living in under this cult leadership and watching cultism.
Yeah. I will say, if the show taught me anything, even in the moment when I was still drinking the Kool-Aid and I still didn't really have any perspective on what was happening and then what had happened while I was filming, my immediate takeaway that I still hold was like, oh, wow, I don't think I can judge anyone's reaction in extreme circumstances because I am so constantly surprised by my own reaction in these extreme circumstances. I just was like, I don't know. I thought I could predict how I would react to X, Y, and Z. And I still, when I talk about the show, I still get so many people being like, oh, well, I would do this and I would do that and X, Y, and Z, or I would never. And I'm like, you don't know that. And I know that because I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so it's so weird watching people be in a cult without realizing they're in a cult and having literally watched on screen myself be in a cult without knowing I was in a cult. I do have a little bit of compassion. That's about as far as the compassion goes. It's hard. It's hard. And I say I have compassion in the moment, on the streets, in the comments online. It's very hard to have compassion. It's so frustrating to watch people be in a cult without knowing they're in a cult. And it is, once you see it, you sort of see it everywhere. And I read Amanda Montell's book and it opened my eyes to the whole experience. And it also opened my eyes to like the levels of cultitude. And in the book, she talks about how there are like very harmless cults, like SoulCycle. Mm-hmm. It's pretty culty. It's got its own language. There's like rewards and detractions if you don't participate right, but it's pretty healthy, pretty harmless, aside from, how it participates in certain like fat phobic ideas and the idea that you have to like work off meals. But like everyone does that. So baseline, pretty harmless. But once you see it, it's like, I don't know the answer. Like, I don't know. How do you shake someone out of it? who doesn't want to be shaken out of it? Because I know that it was hard as hell to shake me out of it. And all that did it was time and distance and education, which is becoming harder and harder to provide.
So I wonder, Sarah, having sort of gone through it as a young adult and now like being a parent to a girl, no less, if your daughter at like 17 or 18 is like, oh my God, mom, I have gotten accepted to go on whatever this iteration is of like America's Next Top Models show, right? Like
Gilead's Next Top Model.
Exactly, right? Gilead's Next Top Handmaid, like whatever.
Yeah.
What would you say to her?
So, not the first time I've gotten this question, and I think my answer has changed a little bit, but I hope that I can raise her to feel like how she looks is not the most important thing about her. Honestly, I would love it if I could raise her to think how she looks is the least important thing about her, but I'll accept not the most important thing because I knew I was smart. I knew I was supposed to go to college. I knew that I had other attributes and I didn't care about them. I cared about how I look. And I had a smart, intellectual family. I know they did their best. I know that they did what they could, but they did raise me to believe that that was the most important thing about me. So if I can just make her think it doesn't matter that much, I'll feel like I've succeeded. And so I would hope then that it would be a lot less tantalizing and it would be a lot less tempting because why would she go on a show that cares so much about something that isn't that important to her? I hope. And the other thing is, I hope that I can raise her to have a really strong sense of self and to get validation from herself and from being a really good member of a community.
Mm-hmm.
We talk so much about like her friends and her people around us and how lucky we are to have community and how lucky we are to be a part of Brooklyn and how she goes to mutual aid meetings with me and is really disruptive and not helpful. But she has fun.
And she's there. She's getting something.
You know, sometimes you just have to show up. No, and also she's a friggin' toddler. I don't really expect her to, like, I don't think she's going to organize the next food drive. But I really hope that I can, like, stress the importance of community because I think that is a lot of what I was seeking is, like, validation and community. And so I hope it would never come up. But, you know.
Yeah, they're their own people.
They're their own people. And, you know, and also, like, if she did want to go on the show, I would hope that I had been honest enough with her that she would already know all of my thoughts on it and that she would know it's not going to help her financially and it's not going to help her find herself. I hope she wouldn't have any unrealistic expectations going in, which is to say no expectations because it's such a surreal experience. You can't really like go in understanding what it's going to be like because it is so weird and so bizarre and so unlike, I hope unlike anything else she'd experienced. I hope that it would feel very unfamiliar. And also, I hope that she would get a good publicist right afterwards.
That's the practical suggestion.
So we do have to wrap up, but really the question is Sophie's choice. You get to choose for your daughter. She can either go into modeling or stand-up comedy.
Oh, because they've both been so rewarding for me.
So nurturing, really build great community.
Yes, in the face of astonishing misogyny. That's very hard. And I guess I would say modeling only because
It's more women.
it's more women and it's temporary. And it's much easier to go from modeling to comedy, having done it, than to go from stand-up to modeling. So, God, I hope she's a doctor. I don't know, an electrician.
Sarah, it has been a joy and a delight to see you again. So tell folks where they can find the book, where they can find you online, where they can find your daughter. No, I'm kidding.
Don't look for her. She's so small. You'll never find her.
She's at mutual aid, Obvi.
She's at mutual aid, Avi. Also, she's really mean. She'll roast you. Don't find her. She's 3.5. She's amazing. I love it. Yeah, you can find me at sarahbhartshorne.com. And also that's my handle across all platforms. And you can find the book on my website, or you can go to youwannabeontop.com. A real get. Was very proud of that. I snapped that domain right up and please buy my book there.
Get the hardcover for Sarah to sign, but listen to the audiobook. Sarah reads it, and it is so special to hear you tell your story in your voice. Sarah Hartshorne, we love you.
Thank you.
We love you.
I love you. I waved again.
You did.
Thank you, Sarah. Follow Sarah everywhere. Get the book. Do all the things.
As always, these stories will be in the show notes, and you can find the best, most up-to-the-minute resources on accessing abortion care and funding for your care on our website, aafront.org. Our Charlie chatbot on the bottom right will walk anyone, anywhere in the country through their options and resources for abortion.
We do this show because this info is not given enough attention in the media. So help us spread the word and show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Every bit helps us reach more people.
That's our show. Thanks for listening, and thanks again to Sarah.
Did we make you smarter, make you laugh today? Do us a favor. Again, join our Patreon. You'll support us. You'll get great content, cool merch, and experiences. All pledges support this pod and all of our work at Abortion Access Front, so go to patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.
Plus, Abortion Access Front brings the news and info every day, so stay connected with us on social media at Abortion Front across all platforms. With your help, we can get more people to learn about this assault on abortion access.
Now that we've got you informed, let's get you activated. Check out some of our awesome Operation Save Abortion trainings at operationsaveabortion.com. You can get an abortion activist glow up and learn about all the areas abortion providers and patients need your help.
And while you're there, poke around our super cool activist calendar. It's full of local and national actions and educational opportunities, so you can dive right on in. Again, all of that is at operationsaveabortion.com.
Also, one of my favorite opportunities we have is called Adopt a Clinic. It's a great way for the public to support independent clinics, abortion funds, clinic escort groups, and patients directly by ordering much-needed items from an organization's wish list. Today, we're highlighting the Palmetto State Abortion Fund in South Carolina. They help fund reproductive health care for Southerners, not just in South Carolina, but in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. These amazing folks are asking for everything from heating pads to menstrual pads. So look at the link in the show notes and help them out.
And if you want even more ways to get involved, sign up to volunteer. We need you. Go to our website, aafront.org, fill out the volunteer form, and let's figure it out together.
We are dark for the next few weeks because we are preparing for our 10th anniversary celebration. But we will be back November 14th with a very special guest, journalist and national treasure, the one and only E. Jean Carroll.
FPK is edited by Remy DeTournay and is produced by Jen Moon for Abortion Access Front.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week. We're going to leave you just a reminder that you're going to need a Silkwood shower. We're going to replay that clip just so you can connect with the fact that garbage men like him are trying to control our reproductive lives.
God instructs all Christian wives to submit to their husbands. You see, wives, please hear me this morning. The message is not from your husband to submit. The message is from the Lord. Now, ladies, you can rebel against that command. But just please understand, you're not rebelling against your husband when you do. You are rebelling against the Lord.
Feminist Buzzkills, the podcast from Abortion Access Front. New episodes drop Friday. When BS is poppin', we pop off. And if you want to support our podcast and all the work of Abortion Access Front, like, subscribe, and join our Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.